from how many countries do you have customers?
It's going to be more than 100. We had to do a ton of experiments, like tiny things, right? I mean, he came from a sales background. He hated sales. Like free user base is more than, I think, 6 or 7 million now.
What advice do you have for entrepreneurs?
Think twice.
Welcome to the Builder Story. Learn from people who have built really cool stuff that matter. Thank you very much for joining for another episode of the Builder Story. And I have invited someone very special again to this show who just reached 3 million annual recurring revenue, or ARR. The person whom that I have invited to join this particular episode has a unique story which I wanted to share with my audience and also people who are very interested in building their own companies, like tech companies from scratch. Buddhika, welcome to the show.
Hey Shafraz, good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So I saw your post on LinkedIn and you had posted up saying you reached a 3 million ARR, which is great. Congrats to you and the team. Fantastic job. Let's deep dive into your story and how you got started. If you can give a little bit about yourself, how you got started and how you got into entrepreneurship journey.
Thanks, Shafraz. Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad to catch up after, I think, after several years. I started entrepreneurship when I was in the school. I tried to sell different stuff. It was not a proper business, but tried to make some extra money, crafts, repaired electronic stuff. And I also imported stuff from eBay and started selling when I was in the school. Then I got into the university and I got interested in building something, and I joined this hackathon called TADHack in Sri Lanka. Started building some IoT devices, and that's how I got into the tech startup thing. Started to pitch in front of investors, and I was fortunate enough to get into a program called MIT Global Startup Labs in Sri Lanka. That was fantastic, and I think that was the turning point. They taught about all the buzzwords about startups and how you validate ideas and stuff. I think that's how I got into the startup world.
I remember the hackathon that you were, I think 2015, 16 or 14 period. That's when TADHack was a thing, and Sri Lanka had a lot of hackathons happening back then. So you're originally from Sri Lanka, and then you studied at University of Moratuwa. So a lot of successful entrepreneurs have been born in Sri Lanka from your university. If you look at your journey in becoming an entrepreneur, you had some elements that was in place, like going to a hackathon and then being a part of an accelerator, or maybe like a place where you learned about like entrepreneurship, like MIT labs as well.
To be honest, I couldn't speak in English when I was in university, so it was a lot of work. I had to do a lot of practice, especially to pitch in front of investors. Even the language, how you pronounce different words, and how you answer the questions with confidence, all sort of those stuff I had to practice. Especially MIT GSL, they helped a lot. I remember the team; they were really great. From the university, they were more academic focused, but I think some of the professors, they really wanted students to start startups and build something once they get out of the university. So they did their best to help us out as well. But back then, people, they were encouraging us to build things, but it was in the wild. Nobody had ecosystem was not this developed. But I think definitely the things I've learned in the university, especially all the technical stuff and also the network that I built there was super helpful. Because I always think people always open doors, and I told them I'm from a university. That was easier.
You also mentioned about like going to TADHack, right? And it was not the only time that you had a hackathon. How did going to hackathons actually help you in this your entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So my initial funding, I didn't win at TADHack. I just got an opportunity to pitch in front of Lanka Angel Networks instead of angels. Then I just went there, I didn't have big hopes. But when I pitched there, then the MIT team they were there. And they just picked us up. I mean, maybe you should join us. They have already started the program, but in the middle, they invited us. That was, I didn't see that coming, to be honest. That changed entire journey. Then also, then I went for another hackathon back in Sri Lanka, organized by British Council and HSBC. We won that. That gave us initial funding for my first startup, which was Siplo. Yeah, and I think that was easier than pitching in front of investors and raising money. To be honest, it was days work to get some seed funding. It wasn't that bad, to be honest. I would encourage everyone.
Yeah, that's cool. I think the hackathon scene is back. A lot of people with AI, they have started to dabble with this whole technology, different platforms. That's a great advice. Just go there, hack away. You might not know at that point which doors will open up for you. It's just a matter of us just going there, participating.
Because there are it's a great way to expand your network as well. Within a couple of hours, you get the exposure to different levels of people, and it's very hard to otherwise crack that step. It's a great opportunity, I would say.
So thanks for sharing your journey, how you started off and became an entrepreneur. So one thing that popped from your answer was that your first startup was Siplo. It's still available online as well. And I think that's how we kind of connected previously as well, very closely. So with Siplo, what is this company? And then what's the sort of the problem that you found out that you wanted to solve through Siplo?
I went through the Sri Lankan education system. So the initial, it's a very competitive education system. So the initial idea was to build tutoring platform which connects university students to teach for the school's kids who need tuition. So because a lot of my friends, and personally I did some tuition when I was in the university, before I went to the university as well. So the idea came from there. I think the problem made sense, but technology adoption and the TAM wasn't there. When I look back, it was a pretty small TAM. But I think we learned a lot from that. We built a cool platform. We learned a lot about especially real-time communications. But we couldn't, gain enough traction to expand that to millions of dollars. But yeah, the platform is still there. Still, it generates some revenue, which I can't complain. But it's a good learning.
Yeah, of course. Like especially in countries like in Sri Lanka, right, where we both have gone through the system of tuition classes, they'll have their own platforms, or maybe they'll have their own ways of working. Sometimes it's not pretty technical. The folks who are managing are not technically savvy, they are not open, and then they want to have a certain control of how things work, which is not easy. And then there are like the mega sirs, like the mega tuition teachers, right? They want to have their own authority, like things like that, and especially like the institutions also has.
I think there are a lot of people who are making a profit out of the education system, but it is what it is. It's mostly like, I would say, it's close to entertainment industry.
And then if you look at social media as well these days, it's a matter of eyeballs now, number of eyeballs that a sir would get or a teacher would get through their viral clips.
Exactly.
It's get attracted. So interesting. So Siplo, you started with Siplo and then you moved on to do much more bigger things in your entrepreneurship journey. You were in Sri Lanka and then you were operating out of Singapore for a while, and then you moved to Australia as well now. So what made you want to move to Australia, and then what are some of the benefits that you find in becoming an entrepreneur based out of Australia?
So I think after Siplo, didn't work. So me and my co-founders realized that it's not gonna work. I decided to try something else, and then I started a consultancy called Matrix. It was specialized in real-time communications. We were building custom video conferencing systems for like some organizations who don't want to use Zoom or Google Meet. They want something in-house because of security and other concerns. So I learned a lot of things when I was working at Siplo. So use the same technologies to build that company. One of the problems that I had was when some clients, they really want us to come there and fix something, or have a chat. So they want to come us next week. So if someone from Europe, I remember an incident. I got a call from someone and they asked me to come next week and to have a chat about the project that they want us to deliver. I couldn't because the visa itself would take 4 weeks. Forget. I had a couple of such incidents, and I just realized it's going to be very hard. If you want to build something global, it's going to be very hard to do this in this way. So I decided that I should at least try to go to another country and spend a couple of years and see how it looked like. And at least, it'll open up some of the doors. It was a hypothesis, but based on that, I came to Australia. It was great. It was easy to build things. You can forecast things for much longer than it was in Sri Lanka. And the infrastructure is already there. The people that you can meet, meet people who have done that before, who have made millions, who have exited startups. There are investors who can connect with other investors. So I think the ecosystem is much more mature, and you can put the same effort in Sri Lanka or in another country, and the outcome would be significantly different, in my opinion. I might be wrong, but for some of the ideas and some of the startups, if you're building something global, I think the location matters.
I agree with you, because location matters. It's not only because geographical sort of advantage, but also it talks it speaks for the network, it speaks for the infrastructure, it speaks for the regulations, and also to become a entrepreneur, be successful, you should not be worrying about having to go through thousands of processes as well, right?
Yeah, it's very hard, even I remember that. It's even posting a letter, it takes a couple of hours in Sri Lanka. It's very hard to focus on your startup when you have to battle with 1,000 other things, because you already have 1,000 different problems as a founder. You can't battle many more.
Yeah, the folks who are watching this video from Sri Lanka might get upset a little, but it is what it is. But glad that things are sort of changing now. There's this new announcement where PayPal been released in Sri Lanka, which is amazing, which helps for a lot of entrepreneurs. There are a lot of homegrown entrepreneurs as well. Before Buddhika and we started this conversation, we started talking about people who are there already doing some amazing work. So don't get upset. You still can build a company, but when you want to scale, you should be thinking about other things that comes into play as well. So Buddhika, now you were mentioning about what made you move to Australia. Now you're based out of Melbourne. You get to meet a lot of these folks from the network itself. You joined Antler. Not a lot of Sri Lankans that I know of have joined Antler. One person is you, and then I recently met Tarindu as well, who joined Antler in Singapore. Antler, for those who don't know, so that's a program, that's an accelerator program for startups that they find which matches certain criteria, certain revenue level to come on board, and then they help you out with certain guidance and also sometimes in funding as well. So you joined Antler in Australia. So tell us a little bit about your journey in joining Antler.
Yeah, I think when I was trying to build something in Australia, one of the problems that I had was I'm a technical person. I'm not very good at talking and networking with people. Also, culture is different. So culturally, there's a lot to learn. So it takes some time to build the network and all. I wanted a co-founder. So actually, when I joined, I was trying to find a co-founder first through Y Combinator. They have something called Y Combinator Startup School. But most of the founders, they were from the US. It was pretty hard to find someone who can work in my time zone. So I decided to join Antler. The primary criteria for me was to find a good co-founder, and then we can figure things out after that. That was the idea. And they back then their sole focus was to connect commercial founders with technical founders. and let them build something. And their philosophy was pretty good, and then that was exactly what I wanted as well. It was pretty straightforward because I was technical, and they were looking for technical co-founders to quit their jobs and join. It was a pretty tough decision, to be honest. But yeah, after joining, it was they had a pretty good process to facilitate conversations with founders, and doing different workshops and letting you form a team, and some guidance around formation, validation, etc. That was a pretty good program.
Awesome. So from there onwards, you started ScreenApp. ScreenApp is what's making you 3 million ARR at the moment. So how did you get started with ScreenApp? Because I can see a little bit of precursor that you had from your previous company, where you were mentioning about like real-time communication, like you were building some stuff, consultancy work, people who don't want to use those. I think some of those learnings would have come into play here as well. Buddhika, so tell us more about like ScreenApp and how does it work?
I build a lot of tools. I mean, usually during the weekend I build stuff, just tinkering around. So ScreenApp was one of those projects. I built it to solve one of my problems. So back when I was working with Matrix team, I had to repeat some of the stuff, especially for interns. There were other tools like Loom, but user experience was pretty, not too bad, but you had to click a few buttons. So I wanted to record everything using a single button. So that was my problem. I wanted to have a single button. I didn't want to install any extension. That's how we started building ScreenApp. That was there for some time. It was just a simple screen recorder, nothing more. That gained some traction when I joined Antler. To be honest, that wasn't the initial idea even, but that project was there on the side. Then I showed him to Andre, and he just connect all the data points into HubSpot, I think, and there were a lot of users from Fortune 500 companies who were using that as a free tool back then, which I didn't know about, to be honest. Then we thought, okay, he came from a video tech background, and he was a salesperson, and he had a pretty good idea about how to sell those SaaS video tools. And we pitched the idea, and we went through IC, and we got funding. So the deadline to pitch and to prepare a pitch was like 3 hours away when we decided that we're going to go with the ScreenApp. But I think we did it pretty fast. I don't think many believed in us getting funding as well, but I think we did a pretty good job there, convincing IC to fund us.
That's amazing. So just to I'm going to sidetrack from here, just to know how many companies have you built so far?
Companies, I think about 5. I think I counted the projects a few weeks ago. Probably about 83, 85 projects.
Wow.
Different things, but proper establishments. I've done Siplo, that was the first one. Titopia with Nuha in Singapore. I think at our best year we did about 1.5 Singapore dollars, 1.5 million in revenue. Matrix, it was a consultancy. Then ScreenApp. Now we have built KO pretty recently, a couple of months ago.
I think for you, it naturally comes to you starting off a business or maybe a company or a startup. It seems to be very natural and comes very naturally to you. But I am pretty sure it wasn't the case. But let's dig deep dive into it later in another question. But just to understand, coming back to ScreenApp, right? With ScreenApp, how big is your team? Because I'm sure for a company or a product like this, you need certain skill sets, not just you can scale, right? How big is your team?
Yeah, it's about 10 people, mostly in Sri Lanka. The Matrix team who were working with me, I transitioned everyone. It was a service-based business to ScreenApp. So everyone who worked at Matrix now it's ScreenApp. So it's about 5 developers, a product manager, UX person, and a SEO person.
Nice. That's great. That's amazing. One thing that you pointed out is the development team is based out of Sri Lanka. So that means you are actually employing folks from Sri Lanka as well. When you started off ScreenApp, right? You mentioned about you had the co-founder, you found the person from Antler. But apart from that, what are some of the initial challenges that you had? Maybe can be from technology, or maybe from business area that you now when you look back?
ScreenApp was a freemium tool from the beginning. We had a lot of free users. Biggest challenge was monetization, because I personally didn't have a good experience when it comes to monetization. But my co-founder Andre he was brutal. Like he wanted to monetize this aggressively. The initial challenge was, there were a lot of free users who are using the system, and we got a lot of feedback from them. But there were some paid users, but they were pretty small. So we had to decide, how to prioritize features, what to build. Then we had to, experiment a lot. So some of the feedback that we got from free users were different from the feedback that we got from paid users. So actually back then we decided to prioritize the feedback from paid users and try to change the target market a little bit, and the product roadmap as well, cater the paid users better. So figuring that out took us some time, running a lot of experiment with pricing to identify, change the pricing, giving them discounts, having trials, removing trials, even the pricing table, designing the pricing table multiple times, changing the wordings. And also, so my co-founder, he's a business person, but one thing that I really struggled with, he wanted to change stuff. Then I had to go to the designer, then I had to implement it. It's a long cycle. So the solution for that was I built a system where he can change stuff really fast, pricing tables and everything. So we can, iterate in parallel. So he can iterate pricing, messaging, everything with a simple configuration. This was, before the AI coding tools became a thing. Then he's pretty switched on. He can figure things out pretty quickly. Then we were able to, iterate through things really, really fast. Figuring out that process was a bit challenging initially. How to increase your velocity and not break things as well. The other thing was transitioning. So my team in Sri Lanka, they were doing consultancy before, right? Transitioning from that mindset to product mindset was also pretty hard. It took a bit of time. Most of the team members, they have been working with me for quite some time. Amazing talent. So, but sometimes, doing a product and doing a service, those are two different things, two different mindsets. That transition took a bit of time. Then lastly, I think the funding. Antler funded us 200,000 Australian dollars. We were pretty frugal. We could do things, but deciding whether we should raise another round or whether we should put our entire effort to building the product and making that decision was pretty tough. I think what we tried for a couple of months to raise funds, but then ChatGPT came up and every investor was confused a little bit for a few months. And I think one of our advisors told us, okay, it would be much easier to take money from your customers than from the investors. So then we just focused on making the product better and make it profitable. Yeah, making that decision, that was pretty tough one. You never know what's going to happen, and it was very risky as well. It was all against the VC startup playbook as well. Anyway, we did that.
If we double click on the point that you were mentioning, your co-founder was pretty aggressive on the sales part, and also you looked at the paid customers, right, what their needs are. When you look at the feedback, right, how often or how much of quality feedback do you get? Is there a process that you follow to make sure that you get quality feedback? Because not necessarily everyone is eager or maybe helpful in giving feedback. And the second part is the feedback that you get might not be the feedback that you already are getting. Some folks, they would do focus groups just to understand how the products are working. But in your case, you're on a horse. You're actually riding a pretty fast moving wave at this point. So how did you get that feedback and then refine your product?
Initially, we had one-on-one conversations with customers. That was brutal. Most of our users were in US, so we had to stay till midnight and have the customer calls, which are allowed initially. But it wasn't. It was qualitative feedback, but you couldn't measure things at scale in that way. So what we have, ScreenApp is essentially, it's a recording tool, right? It records stuff and summarizes things. Then we had a couple of support team members who did that, and we got the summary from ScreenApp itself. So we built that part out. Then actually we measure everything in post-op. Like we A/B test a lot. Those are quantitative feedback mostly. For example, if we have a hypothesis that, and my co-founder initially, so he has an idea that I have an idea, then user needs something, maybe and they explain something that they want, right? But you can interpret that in different ways, and you have to prioritize that with other things as well. So what we usually do is we put a button or some action item somewhere to validate. We don't build it yet, and we measure how many people who really want that. If that takes a lot of effort, sometimes we put a pay now button or upgrade now button, something related to conversion there, and see if it is really worth it. So we built that feedback loop into the product itself rather than relying on qualitative feedback. So if you wanted to build something, if somebody requests a feature that only this person who wants that, or are there other people who want that, it was easy to measure once you use some kind of a CTA within the application.
Yeah.
So that was our mechanism. Still, that's the way that we use to build feedback loops. That works really well. It's very low effort, and you don't have to build anything. You can just validate things, and if people are willing to pay, and then it's a no-brainer to prioritize and build that.
Totally makes sense. I think it's a very good approach as well. One part of common questions, even not only for startup, bigger companies as well, getting this feedback from the customers and then iterating, building, making the product better, right? Can be quite a challenge as well, what they want. I think this is a very good way of doing it. Now, you were also mentioning about Buddhika. Now, you had some of the members of the team that you moved in, from the previous company to the new company as well. While you were doing this transition, you were already running a business, ScreenApp was already running, right? How much of did you have a team who was ready to go and build things, or how long did it take to do this transition?
Yeah, it took almost 6 months, as I remember. They were ready, but the problem is, the time zone difference, so we get a requirement early in the morning. So if somebody complains about something, we had to fix it then and there. And my co-founder wouldn't wait. So I told him he's pretty fast. He implements things fast. If I'm late, he's gonna figure things out and he's gonna do it by himself. I wanted to make sure we are not building that co-founder relationship matters as well at the early stages. I didn't want to disappoint him, so I didn't want to move everyone all at once. So I made sure we iterate around something. Then there were a couple of people who were already working on it anyway, so they had a pretty good understanding about the product. But to move entire team, it took about 6 months to make sure that everyone can come on board, and we're going to fully focus on this to make that decision. I think, and also to build confidence about the team for my co-founder, it took a bit of time.
Amazing. So people also might want to know, how do you build a pricing chart? What goes into when you're deciding a pricing?
We had to do a ton of experiments, tiny things, right? You can't just put something there and expect that pricing chart is going to convert. So we A/B tested a lot of pricing tables. For example, a user clicks on a feature. So what we have done is we have listed all the features that we have in the platform, and we implemented limits for everything. Then we started measuring what are the features that people are using the most. Then we started, changing the limits and started to experiment where the most conversion happens. So we did it on almost daily basis. We changed things aggressively. We A/B tested. We changed the messaging as well. When you click on a feature, we just don't tell them, okay, please upgrade. We tell them, because you can get this feature, the custom messaging for each feature to encourage them to upgrade. So it's a ton of experiments. I don't think there's a pricing table that works for all the scenarios. For some products it could be pretty simple. For some products it might have to be very customized for each and every feature. You're going to have to experiment. I don't know what will work, but what I know is if you experiment fast enough, you will figure out soon enough.
If you experiment fast enough, you will figure out soon enough. You were mentioning about you're tracking certain X, Y, and Z matrices, if things are working, to see if people are using these features. In order for you to do all these things, I'm pretty sure you need a good analytics backend. Do you use a certain tool to do that, or have you built a custom-made something?
Yeah, we primarily use Postdog to measure all the metrics that we want. That's our go-to dashboard, to be honest. Then we also use ChartMogul to measure all the SaaS metrics, all the churn, ARR, and everything. Then we have separate alerts in the technical level. Those are being used by our technical team to understand if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So we have built that in a way. So we deploy things very fast. Like try to do 2 releases every day. We expect something to break all the time. So the idea that, the philosophy that we have is when you do a release, something could go wrong. You should be able to figure that out by looking at your dashboard rather than waiting for someone else to come and tell you. So we operate in that philosophy. We try to roll it out. We do gradual rollouts. We try to minimize disruption as much as possible. But also ChartMogul and the backend logs, we try to measure everything as much as possible.
Awesome. That's a good approach. And I'm pretty sure when you were measuring also, some people die out of measuring everything. So you had to probably did you start measuring everything at initial stages and then picked up what they really want? Or maybe since you have experience in building companies previously, did you know what exactly to measure?
It depends on the personality as well. So I hate meetings, to be honest. So the problem is if you don't measure things, you have to go to a lot of meetings, which consumes a lot of times, and you have to ask someone, okay, how did it go wrong? And that person has to take some time to dig in, which is pretty hard. So to solve that, initially we did not have a lot of matrices, but then we realized, even some of the team members in my team, they were very silent. They would do the work, they wouldn't speak a word sometimes. Then we started, measuring things. Even as soon as we figured out a bug, before even implementing the fix, we would probably implement a metric to identify whether that bug has been resolved or not after we deploy. So then we know for sure after. Sometimes, when you think you have fixed the bug, sometimes it's not the case. It could be something else.
Yep.
So I think it took a bit of time for us to get into that mindset, what to measure and when to measure and what not to measure as well. But I think once you get to that habit, it was easy.
So now some person might ask, Buddhika, now you have built a product and then your team was building this together. Reaching 3 million ARR, it doesn't happen organically. So you need to have some outbound and inbound mechanisms in place to reach this type of revenue and go beyond also, right? So what were some of the tactics or methods that you use for inbound and outbound?
Yeah, we don't do outbound, to be honest. We did outbound initially, but it was very hard to do especially because of the time zone. So our team is in Sri Lanka, we are in Australia. Most of our clients are in the US, and we had a support team in Philippines. It was very hard to coordinate with all these teams together. And my co-founder, he came from a sales background. He hated sales. He wanted to make it sales as much as self-serviceable. So we built in that philosophy. So the initial idea was we make sure it is self-serviceable, and we identify the emails of the users who are coming from the same organizations, and then we do a kind of an enterprise sale or something like that. That was the initial philosophy. Then we built a lot of micro tools, with different use cases. We rely a lot on SEO. We created a kind of a custom stack that can generate pages, optimize pages, so the entire marketing thing is automated. Then we do kind of outbound sales. It's still experimental, but that has been done by an open flow agent. So most of the support is now handled by, almost all support is handled by open flow. So when we get an inquiry, that agent will escalate that. If we have to jump into a call, a person will take the call. We avoided outbound sales as much as possible until we are confident that we can we can sell this to an enterprise. Especially otherwise, it's going to be a waste of time. Because if we had to sell this in Australia, it would be easy. But if you want to sell something in the US, you have to have some presence there, at least in their time zone. So primarily focus on SEO and word of mouth. One of the things that we have done early on is targeting different languages, and then users from different countries, they started promoting us by themselves, explaining this is how to use this tool. That worked pretty well for us.
Wow. So from how many countries do you have customers from?
It's more than 100 users from almost every country. Our free user base is more than 6 or 7 million now.
Wow.
So they might not be using all at once because we have different micro tools and different stuff. But yeah, it's being used by a lot of people.
That's amazing. One thing that actually popped into my mind is that you were saying you have an OpenClaw agent to handle the support. And there's also this movement where a lot of people started speaking, like saying AI can help a lot of solopreneurs to build something and then manage through agents, etc. But when you really look at it from a operational point of view, like when you scale some of these like products, etc., you actually need some human element to it as well. So what's your take on like solopreneurs who are building 1 billion companies?
It might happen because one of the problems I have as a founder is achieving the velocity that I want to achieve with another human being. It's very hard. You have to explain things. That it's going to be very hard to propagate that founder energy even to your first employee. It's tough, and you can't expect someone to give up everything and just work for your startup, right? With AI agents, what I've found is they make a lot of mistakes, but it's very easy to rectify. You can just, especially repetitive stuff, it's not that hard to make it work, at least to some extent, at least in the initial stages until you figure things out. Then after that, of course, you might need a human because they can't talk. One thing that I've done with Carvo is, it's primarily handled by an agent, but it sends emails. It can handle all the text, but it can't call, right? So it just creates a ticket in the system, and the person takes the call. It's hard to say whether it will happen or not, but I think definitely it's very useful to iterate faster. It saves a lot of time and energy, because hiring it's pretty hard, and also if that doesn't work, you have to fire that person. It's going to haunt you for quite some time. So I would like to avoid that as much as possible, especially in the early stages. You never know whether it's going to work or not, right? So without that burden, it's always easy to if you can figure things out, it's always easy to use an AI agent and see what happens.
Thanks. We actually learned a lot about ScreenApp, how it works, etc. For you, it comes very naturally to starting off businesses. Like, what's your playbook that you have refined over time that makes for you to sort of build companies which are profitable?
I can build things pretty fast, right? So that's my blind spot. So initially, I started building things as soon as I get the idea. So I stopped it. So I think that was the key to make sure that I don't build things until I'm super confident that this is going to work. I try to validate the idea and without building. Then I build. So also, there's an opportunity cost. As soon as you start building something, there are 1,000 different things that you are not going to build because that you picked that opportunity. So based on your circumstances, I think that should be the best idea that you can build at that time. And I look into a big TAM. The TAM should be big enough. If that is not big enough, that means your chances of success is going to be pretty small as well. Yeah, and after you pick an idea, you just ship like a crazy horse, and until you get the first few customers, somehow you work relentlessly. That works most of the time.
So for those who don't know what TAM is not a technical account manager. That is total addressable market. So the amount of people that you can reach out to, and there's another term called the ICP, ideal customer persona. So now you shared your playbook Buddhika, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs or people who want to become an entrepreneur this day and age?
I think twice before. It's a lot of work. All these bright and shiny things. It's a lot of commitment. Like you have a lot of control. One thing that I love about entrepreneurship is you have a lot of control over your own time. You can decide how to spend your time and what to do next. But that comes with a lot of burden. You have to, maybe financially you have to struggle sometimes, especially in the early days. You're gonna have to survive somehow, and also you have to make some tough decisions. Especially building is the easier part, I would say, but hiring, firing, those are not that easy. But it's a journey, and if you have an idea, validate it first. Don't just build it. It might not work. Always go back to the problem. As soon as you build something, you're gonna try to iterate the solution rather than going around the problem, which might waste your time. So always make sure that you understand the problem really well. Make sure that the solution that you came up is the real solution that the people want. Otherwise, you're building something that people don't want, and you're just wasting your time. Yeah, and once you started building, just make sure you have a fantastic velocity, iterate really, really fast. Then something will happen. Either you will fail really fast, or you're going to become really successful fast.
Great. One thing that you're doing is also building in public. People might be fearful towards building public, thinking that someone will steal the idea. So that's not the case if you have the velocity, right?
Exactly. I mean, ideas are everywhere. Even ideas are not unique, except for some of the ideas, But it's going to be execution is the velocity, and the execution style and speed. Those things matter. That's what I've learned. As soon as you can move really fast, it doesn't matter.
Thanks, Buddhika. We are wishing you all the very best for the future of ScreenApp and your entrepreneurship journey. Looking forward to see you doing great things in the future. And of course, in another episode, let's catch up again how you're doing with your other application for the elderly care, which you just launched. I'm sure there's going to be some amazing story. Thanks for joining, Buddhika.
Thanks for having me, Shafraz.